On today's podcast, we're talking about 5 stories great cultures perpetuate with their people in order to galvanize people and help them come together to create a compelling culture and accomplish things they could not accomplish on their own. The stories great cultures perpetuate have these attributes. Welcome back to The Thermostat with Jason Barger. If you're currently on a commute, a walk, or just a micro break in your day, glad you're making time to step back, to think, and to reflect on the next steps on your journey. I've never been more convinced the best leaders and team cultures in the world are the ones that make time to step back, breathe in good oxygen, and calibrate their thermostat. I hope today's conversation leaves you feeling grounded and inspired. Now let's dive into today's topic to engage our minds and hearts in order to authentically lead and create compelling cultures wherever we are in the world. Hey everybody, it's Jason, and welcome back to the Thermostat Podcast. Wherever you are, however you're coming to the podcast today, welcome in. So glad you are here. So glad you are making time in your life, in your work, wherever it is that you are, to step back, to take a deep breath, and hopefully be filled with some ideas, some thoughts for your own life, but also certainly for the culture that you're trying to create with the people around you and for your team at work or the organization you work for, or just however you're thinking about this for your life. So glad you are here. We've got nearly, actually more than 200 episodes now at this point. So if you haven't checked out the past episodes, I invite you to go back, check those out. And so many great interviews, different topics that will hopefully contribute and add value to your life and your work. And if you are one of the OGs, I've been with us from the very beginning, I still encourage you to go back and check out the old stuff. So much great stuff. Before we dive into today, if you will do me the quick favor, rate the podcast 5 stars. You know the drill. Whatever platform you're on, 5 stars. Leave an authentic review in whatever, in your own words. Those 2 ways are so helpful to helping other people find the podcast. So those 2 things, rate it 5 stars, leave a review, your authentic words. And obviously, every time you share it with somebody, your team, colleagues, people in your life, say, hey, you got to check this out. This topic or whatever will resonate with you. Those are the ways in which this amplifies, spreads, and thank you to everybody that takes the time to do that. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Stories are powerful. Stories are powerful. They send messages. They help us learn lessons. The stories themselves help shape the way we experience different situations. Humans often remember a good story. A good story is memorable. And so is a bad one that stays with us. And either way, stories leave an impression on us. So the question is, what are the stories that we are perpetuating or sharing with the people around us? What are you sharing? What stories do you choose to share and are perpetuating the message, the idea, the perception in the story? What is it that you are perpetuating for yourself and also for the people around you? And are they the stories that we want to help lead us into the future? Are the stories connected to that future that for yourself, or, if these are stories you're telling in your own head, or the stories you tell across your team, your organization, your culture, in your family, are the stories representative of the future culture that you want to create? One of the most common elements of leadership that people point to, whenever I ask the question of, tell me the most influential, exceptional, compelling leader that people have experienced in their life or witnessed or observed, somewhere in there, they talk about the ability to communicate clearly and passionately about a future that others want to help be a part of and help want to create. They tell a story and paint an image clearly and passionately about a future and about something that they want to create and others want to be a part of. And they often use stories to help capture the imagination of the people that they're serving, the people that they're leading, in order to help paint that vision for the future, in order to teach lessons, and also to help message how they want to face the obstacles or opportunities that will undoubtedly come on the road ahead. Stories are powerful, and storytelling has a huge impact on cultures and represent the values that the group honors at their core. If you just listen, step back and listen to the stories that different teams and leaders and organizations tell, it oftentimes will point back to truly what they honor. And the stories that align with the values for their organization or for their team, then it enhances and anchors the values that are near and dear to them. And if you step back and you listen and the stories that they tell are actually counter to the values that they talk about, then that creates that kind of cultural dissonance that we've talked about in past episodes. And so what they're honoring, the stories they're telling and what they're honoring is actually separate from what they say they want. So storytelling has a huge impact on cultures and really represent the values that the group honors at their core. This episode that we're going to dive into today talking about storytelling was inspired by Nick Westergaard's article in the Harvard Business Review that identifies how important storytelling is for leaders and the narratives the very best leaders seem to master. I'm going to bring my, reflections and observations to these ideas and build up upon them from my angle of what I'm seeing within teams and organizations. The angle of not just leadership, but how these stories impact the cultures that we create. So, on today's podcast, we're talking about 5 stories great cultures perpetuate with their people in order to galvanize people and help them come together to create a compelling culture and accomplish things they could not accomplish on their own. But before we dive into today's topic, let's pause, take a quick break, and we'll be right back. Hey everyone, I want to take a quick minute just to remind you about one of my favorite days of the year that is coming up on Friday, November 3rd, 2023 for Thermostat Cultures Live. This is a powerful day of development that I host and an opportunity for us all to step back, take a deep breath, and calibrate our thermostats for the road ahead in our own leadership roles, our lives, and certainly with the cultures that we are creating. This year, it's a hybrid event, and there are limited seats available for the in-person VIP experience in Columbus, Ohio. That's right, it's a really cool in-person VIP experience in Columbus, Ohio, as well as there are online virtual seats available for those who want to engage from a remote location. As always, I'll be joined by amazing thought leaders from around the globe, and it will be a day you won't want to miss. So visit thermostatcultureslive.com, thermostatcultureslive.com to learn more and to reserve your seat or seats for your entire team. Stories are powerful. Again, they send messages, they help us learn lessons, and they help shape the way we experience situations. And we know this just from human development, is that humans often remember a good story or a bad story, and it leaves an impression on them, that we are more likely to remember what happened when it's told by a story, certainly a good story or a bad story that often leaves an impression on us. So the question is that we're talking about today is, what are the stories that we are perpetuating for ourselves individually, but also for our team and for the people around us and for the cultures? What are the stories we are perpetuating and sharing with the people around us? And are they the stories that we want to help lead us into the future that we actually want to create? Are we spending our energy and our resources and our time on stories that are disconnected from the future that we want, or just talking about doom and gloom or, things in the world that we actually don't want to be a part of? Or are we telling stories that are going to galvanize people around and bring us together to help lead and create a future that we actually want to be a part of, whether that's in our individual relationships, whether that's on our team, or whether that's in an entire organization? So as I study and I research and I experience compelling cultures firsthand, many of the teams and organizations that I work with firsthand, here are 5 stories that the great cultures share often. Now, they all share them differently, and they all share it in their own unique ways, but these are similar types of stories that are stories, are illustrations, are authentic examples that And again, every team, every leader, every organization finds their own way to share these, but these are 5 types of stories that great cultures share often. And all of these stories have some commonalities and are perpetuated throughout these compelling cultures and have these particular elements in common. So the stories great cultures perpetuate have these attributes. One type of story that the great cultures typically share and perpetuate with their people is the vision story. The vision story. Which again, every company, every leader, every team, organization obviously tells it differently and unique and hopefully compelling for them. But the great cultures tell a vision story, which means people need to be able to imagine a future that doesn't exist yet. The best leaders and cultures share stories about the future that help people see what is possible into the future. Vision stories help inspire people to see a shared vision for the future and the role that they individually can play in creating it when we as a group commit to stimulating progress together. The focus of a vision story is on that future that is yet to be created, but sharing what it could look like. So a famous example of this would be Martin Luther King Jr.'s "I Have a Dream" speech is a classic example of a vision story. I have a dream about a future that doesn't exist yet, and here's what it looks like. And the purpose of this is to inspire us all around a shared vision and to think about what is the role that we play in helping to create it. So the best and the greatest cultures on the planet, they tell some form of a vision story about where it is they're trying to go and what it looks like into the future, and it helps people connect to, I want to be a part of helping to create it. So great cultures tell a vision story. Great cultures also tell a values story. A values story. So cultures become compelling. Cultures between relationships, between teams, between organizations. Again, cultures are dynamic, which, again, I'm going to talk about here in just a second. But if we know that about them, the way they become compelling is cultures become compelling when the people within the cultural ecosystem, which everybody a part of it plays a role, share and honor values for how they show up with each other and the work that they do. The focus of a value story is to help model for people what it looks like to live and work with the values of the culture for not just what we do, but how we do it. And an example that Westergaard shares in his Harvard Business Review article is from Zoom CEO Eric Yuan, who he talks a lot about a family-first mindset. And the example he gives is that he's always talking at Zoom as about the organization, the value that they're trying to create within the organization is a very family-first mindset. And so he preaches this across the company. And one of the stories that he uses as an example is he tells a story about the time he was late to the company's Christmas party. As the CEO, he was late to his own Christmas party because he was traveling with his son's basketball team. And, he shares that story of an example to say, if I'm the CEO, and again, even for the Christmas party that I'm hosting for the entire company, I was even late to it because I talk about a family-first culture, and I was still traveling with my kid's basketball game, and so I was a little late to our meeting. And because of that, it's trying to empower and tell a story about what they value as a company. Personally, I know many other examples from different organizations that I've worked with in companies, but the one that rises to the surface for me, too, is I know the orange chicken story that Cameron Mitchell Restaurants tells about the time when a chef or somebody in a restaurant got a call from a family where a boy was very sick in a hospital. And the boy loved orange chicken. So they were saying, can we get an order of orange chicken? And without hesitation, the person who answered the phone, who already knew we don't have orange chicken on the menu, but didn't tell him that and just said, where are you? Once they understood the situation, Let me get back to you. And next thing you know, the chef got together. They figured out the situation. Here's a boy who's in a hospital bed, and the family he loves orange chicken. They're trying to brighten his day. And so even though it's not on the menu, the chef pulled together their version of orange chicken, and then it was delivered right to the door at no cost and said, hey, we're thinking about you on behalf of Cameron Mitchell Restaurants. And without even thinking about it, talking about it, strategizing, when they got the opportunity, they knew this was an opportunity for them to live their value of genuine hospitality. And so it was an opportunity and a story that then they tell throughout their company as an example of, here's the genuine hospitality and the value that we want to perpetuate in everything that we do. So great cultures tell a vision story, they tell a value story, and oftentimes, again, they don't just tell it once. They tell these stories over and over again to help anchor them within their culture. But they also tell a progress story, All cultures are dynamic, as I've talked about. Culture is dynamic. It's not static. It's always changing. It's always growing. It's always evolving. So the very best leaders and teams know that stimulating progress is how we all grow and create a future culture. The focus of a progress story is a teachable lesson about how we all are still growing and developing. None of us are a finished product. None of us. Nobody's perfect. No team's perfect. No organization's perfect. And so when people connect to the idea that we all still have things to learn, we are more willing to listen to feedback or challenge the status quo because we're always learning and growing and shaping the future that we want. A famous example of a progress story is the famous story about Michael Jordan getting cut from his varsity basketball team in high school. That even Michael Jordan, the person that went on to become what most consider the best basketball player to ever live, or if you're a newer generation, and there are certainly people, we can talk about the Mount Rushmore, but Michael Jordan became an icon and what many consider, if he's not the best, one of the best. And even he, in high school, didn't make his varsity team right away. That there were opportunities for him to improve, opportunities for him to learn and progress, and eventually he became, what he became because of that progress and that commitment to the craft and growing and developing. So a progress story is rooted in that none of us are perfect and all of us are still progressing, and telling that to help paint that image in that story. Great cultures not only tell a vision story, a value story, a progress story, but there's two others that they often tell as I step back and research and also am aware of these within the organizations I serve. The fourth one is a trust story, Vulnerability and humanness has always been important in any relationship, any team, any organization. But there hasn't been a time in my lifetime where it is more important than it is now. People and entire cultures are seeking authenticity and want to trust that someone's intentions are actually genuine. The focus of a trust story is to tell a personal story that shares vulnerability, humanness, and demonstrates an ability to give, to model, to invite trust. How, it shows people that I'm willing to give trust, not just expect trust, but I'm giving it. I'm modeling that I know I have to put myself out there to build a relationship so that we can build that trust, and an invitation to not only trust me, but I want to trust you. An example of this is when a leader shares about the struggles they've had in their own marriage, or how illnesses of family members have impacted them personally, or how their mental health has impacted how they approach their life and their work. Showing that I'm not perfect, I have challenges as well, and yet here's the ways in which I have trusted the people around me and also shown up to navigate my way through these challenges with the support of others and been able to persevere through those things. Trust stories help us connect as humans and model for others that we can share the challenges we might face, not just the great stuff like that we often see from each other, but we can share the challenges we face, and we actually invite others to see some things. And in that is the ability to build trust with one another so that we are genuine and authentic with each other. And the last kind of story is an action story. An action story. Obviously, once you're painting the vision and you're of where you're going to go, you're talking about the values of how you're going to get there. A progress story about, it's going to require resiliency and grit for us to get there. We're going to have to build trust and relationships with each other. And ultimately, we've got to just not have the vision, but we're going to have to bring it to action. So the most compelling cultures inspire action, not busyness. You've heard me talk about busyness versus effectiveness, not busyness, action just for the sake of acting, but the most compelling cultures do inspire positive action. After all, we've come together to stimulate progress as a team or as an organization or as a relationship, and to bring about actions and results that we could not accomplish on our own. We must all bring our gifts, our skills, and our contributions to help inspire action. And the focus of an action story is to compel those within the team or culture to bring actions and behaviors to the vision. Let's make it real. Let's actually create what we say we want. An example of an action story, and I'll connect this, is if you've watched any of the recent documentaries about as Nike, the company Nike was formed and built, but Phil Knight, Nike's founder, of talking about, the slogan of just do it and he's told stories about just doing it even before it was a slogan was something that he built the company on, of going after some of those early athletes like Magic Johnson when others said Nike was quote unquote just a running shoe. And he went after all these athletes with this, not only this vision of that they could become more than just a running shoe company, but he had to go out there and put himself on the line. And he went after big athletes like Magic Johnson and Larry Bird and others and failed with many of them to get them to come on board with Nike until finally he landed Michael Jordan, and it changed the future of their company. But an action story is a grit, a resiliency, a willingness to bring the vision to action by going after it. So, some questions to ponder for today's episode. What stories are you telling? Not only to yourself personally, that's an interesting question. What are the stories you tell yourself in your own head? But what are those stories that you are perpetuating with your team or across your culture, your organization? Which of these stories are needed most to stimulate progress in your life or work? A vision story, a value story, a progress story, a trust story, or an action story. So, I hope today's episode got you thinking in some new ways. If a deeper dive into any of these topics is helpful to you, please reach out. We love it when we hear from people. Shoot us an email, info@jasonvbarger.com, info@jasonvbarger.com, and we're going to continue to develop content that will help hopefully reach you where you are. Lastly, I hope you will go back and listen to any past episodes. So many great interviews and topics that hopefully will add value to your life and your work. Hey, cheers to you. Cheers to us on the road ahead. And I remind myself all the time that the future of leadership is you, is me, is us. And we have the opportunity to get clear on the temperature that we're hoping to set, and then to be courageous and committed enough to breathe oxygen into those mindsets and actions that will sustain our path forward. Step back, remember, be a thermostat, and breathe good oxygen. Thank you for listening to today's podcast, and I hope the messages and questions stimulate positive change along your path. As always, if these messages resonate with you and add value to your life, I hope you'll help amplify them throughout the world. Please rate, comment, and share on whatever podcast or social media platform you're using, and share this podcast with the people in your life or work who should be part of these conversations. That way, this spirit does, in fact, spread. If these messages or developing leaders and culture would be helpful to you and your organization, please contact us at jasonvbarger.com, jasonvbarger.com. And remember, we are all ambassadors for the culture we want to create in our life and work. We have to own the vision we want to be a part of. The future of leadership is you, is me, is us. Be a thermostat.